Hello everyone, this is Chocolate and I have tried to make a little bit of a anti-brick guide, meaning there's quite a few units in Priconne that are a little bit tough to build because either they want to be tanky at the same time that they want to be squishy, or they have really strict requirements into their gear for how they need to be to do some specialized timelines, or they summon something and you need to control the tankiness of that to do some stuff with it. So for those who don't want to read through all these walls of text in here, which I assume are probably most people, I'm just going to go over it in a video and kind of explain some of the stuff here. But I do recommend just reading at least most of it, or these sections on each individual unit before touching her, because I can't really get across everything in a video and I might miss some things. So first of all, the types of units that I go over here are the summoners, so Shinobu, Chika, SSuzume and XChika, which have kind of different goals than the other types of units, which are the, in this case here, the physical shredders, Ruka and Makoto, with physical shred on their UB, and kind of the magical supports of various types here. And yeah, so basically, the thing in Priconne is that units generate TP by taking damage, and that's kind of at the core of all the weirdness that happens in here. And the next part of that is that also ranking up gear sometimes decreases your TP gain stats, so TP boost and TP retain. So what often happens is that if you just carelessly rank up your gear, you lose not only stats, but your unit also gains tankiness that she may not want, because in some cases you need her to be as squishy as possible so she can get more TP from damage and catch the earliest possible timing on her UB. So if you're interested in how these formulas work, you can look at something like, for example, the basic skill reference spreadsheet, where they've got all of them laid out. There's a couple more documents and wiki articles that have all of these, but I like this one just because it's all in one FAQ tab, and it has some other stuff on all the characters and such. It's a very handy sheet. But to get back into my guide, so when I mean brick, or a lot of people just call anything a brick, because let's be real here, as soon as you touch a unit, she's a brick for something. But the most important thing to realize is that when you're actively using a unit, you can't avoid missing out on a timeline somewhere else where she's more optimal in some other configuration, like a little bit lower of a level to catch some earlier timing, or a little bit less gear that you needed this time for her to survive, things like that. And the goal should always be to keep your units at the least tanky that they can be while still surviving. But that's a little bit more difficult when they're damage dealers, because for those, most of the time you can just heap on the damage gear and they're fine. But as we saw for a long time with rank 9 for the fist users or fisters, what happened was that the TP boost and TP retain on that rank was so high that ranking them up would have been a damage loss until like R11.3 and 10.6. So even they're not immune to this, but at least they don't really care as much about it as others. But still, the principle still applies. So if you're not using a unit, don't actually touch her. And if you use her, just be aware that if you go fully high or fully max her out, that you may not be able to play some timelines in the future. but most of the time it doesn't matter as much. Sometimes it's just you get a little bit less of an optimal timeline, or you lose out on a little bit of damage, but sometimes it's kind of major because the timeline just doesn't function at all, and I'll get into that later. So let's start right off here with Ruka, and Ruka is one of our newest characters right now in Global, and there's some kind of uncertainty about her, but in the end she's quite simple. Her S2 is the first of her skills that has kind of a tankiness increase, or also HP increase with the heal, which is kind of specialized, but basically her death buff here, on the one hand it's good for her as a tank because she can be a little bit more tanky, and usually when she's tanking, death or P-def doesn't matter as much. So another good part about it is that with her UB you can actually cancel the death buff without losing the heal, since they're quite delayed. So there's a little bit of time between each other, and you can use UP in between those, so you catch the heal but don't have the death buff active. However, her EX is pure MDEF, and it means one specific timeline for CB13 will not function if it's leveled up. So if the EX skill on Ruka is above level 1, there's going to be some issues unless her gear is very specific and low. So for example, 8.6 Ruka could potentially work with a higher MDEF. However, 8.6 Ruka is non-functional for regular tanking outside of that one specific timeline. So if you want to use her as a multi-use unit, where you don't just use it for one CB and kind of bench her after that because there's not much use, then it's better to kind of go to a higher rank, keep the EX at 1, and just go from there, because you can level up the EX. The rank isn't as important for her, but yeah. So what happens with her? Rank 8 is her highest TP boost, so generally that would be the optimum for getting the most amount of shred, and later on that's probably something where she should be useful at, because once her level gets a lot higher, then she can also survive phase 3 with rank 8, but right now that's just not possible. She needs at least rank 10 and potentially rank 11. Like, for example, let me show you mine. So this is my Ruka. Ignore the shield. That one's not supposed to be equipped, but she's just rank 10-3. This healing pendant gives her a lot of effective HP because it adds HP recovery boost. So this one doesn't make her as tanky, but it adds a lot to her effective HP over a fight. And these swords here are just mostly extra damage, so also add a little bit of healing and a little bit of damage, but she doesn't care about this as much. And obviously EX skill at level 1. So that's one option. Another option that many went to, I suppose, is 11X, as I've kind of described it here, because you kind of want to equip in order until she survives consistently. So top right, top left, bottom right, mid left, bottom left, mid right being the boots, who should go on only if it's absolutely necessary, which it kind of was last CB for C4. For example, 11.5 was the only rank that would be able to survive with EX level 1, and I imagine quite a few Ruka went up there. We did, I think, 4 or 5 hits with that as well, and that's still probably fine. She can go up to 12-0 later, which is kind of the way of adjusting her tankiness down a bit, because you lose the entire bonus from refining, so you kind of take it a little bit down and make her a little bit more viable than the fully maxed out 11.5 when she doesn't need to be as tanky, which is the case with the sheep later on. And yeah, so basically for her, it's just only go as far as needed and keep her AX skill at level 1 however you can make it possible, and it should be fine. And I've added some videos down below from CB10, from our clans or from our partners, and then from the next few CBs, so you can get a feel for how she's used there, and also from very far into the future, where you can see how Suicide Ruka works to enable Princess Hiyori in a very cool timeline. So yeah, overall Ruka, not all that complicated. She just needs some things to watch out for, and that's that. Next up, Makoto. She also isn't all that complicated, except if you're a client and you need to set up your borrows. Because for normal members, all you have to do is you just build yours to whatever the clan demands, and you're set, because every time you can just borrow one of yours for one physical hit and use your own for the other one. And if there's no way to use your own Makoto, then there's something wrong with the routing your clan has. So generally there's not much of an issue with Makoto. Right now we still have some 9.5, like 9.5 is very specialized now, just for borrowing. 9.6 is like one of these standard ones, and going up there 11.6 once we get the rank 12 gear. That's kind of the other major Makoto, because rank 11.6 has a lot of personal damage. So as soon as her shred isn't as important, then rank 11 is very strong, and she can definitely be used better at that rank. In terms of stars, most people should just use 5-star. I mean, let other people take care of the 4-star, and if anyone even uses 3-star, she should be placed in a feeder clan or like a casual clan, so she doesn't impede the clan's overall gameplay, because you use her once in a blue moon, and if you try to keep her in clan all the time, it's just kind of a mess, because she does die a lot of the time and can't play a lot of timelines. So for her, it's often difficulty finding her out. 4-star, as I can show you real quick with my own Makoto. So 4-star is already quite difficult to incorporate into routes, especially 4-star 9.5, who kind of just dies a lot of the time. Like for example, on the C5 last CB, was no way around it. She would die at the last 10 seconds, and this just one of the sacrifices you have to make for having one in clan. And it's just one hit anyway, and the benefit is sometimes quite substantial. Like at this point, I think we've used 4-star Makoto every CB for the last couple, as pretty much half as much as 9.5, and a little bit less than the 9.6 and 11.5 or 11.6 that we're going to see a lot more of now. So for her, skills are completely straightforward, no downside on those. They just go as high as her level, and sometimes her level can be adjusted down. So after each CB, it's best to just leave her at the current level and check timelines for the next one before leveling her up, because sometimes it can be that her level being just 1 or 2 below the current max allows yours to run more timelines. Like for example, sometimes 9.6 can run a few timelines that would otherwise need 9.5. So if you keep your 9.6 low, you can just run both timelines, and that's pretty nice. So yeah, Makoto, everyone loves her, and since you can borrow her, it's all fine. So next up, 6-star Kokkoro. We're quite a ways out from her, but worth mentioning nonetheless, because right now we're already kind of preparing for her, since many are keeping her 10-2. That's not really a regular Kokkoro thing. That's mostly just because we at this point know, okay, 6-star Kokkoro is going to be very powerful, and she's going to stand in front a lot of the time. So perhaps there's some use there for having her less geared. It's obviously the best thing to do. And sometimes also when she takes damage, she can get the first or the early timing on her tank swap being on the second triple strike. So that can sometimes happen, but most of the time, which is kind of funny since we've researched it, 10.6 actually is required for those timelines anyway, because if she takes enough damage to do the early tank swap, she would die without 10.6. So it's kind of a shame that this cool 10.2 build is not all that useful all of the time. And if we look into the future, where, for example, current CN, they just got 6-star Kokkoro a couple CB ago on CB19, and they immediately used her to loop XChika in a XChika loop, and one-punched C5 on the CB9, and one-punched C4 and C5 on CB20. So I don't think I can exaggerate her power level for those first few CB, since the timelines that abuse her the best alongside XChika and Nanaka are just absolutely busted. And it's definitely worth keeping yours in a shape that you can run her in those. So generally for her, it's just keep her at rank 10. And if you need her for tanking purposes, she can rank up to rank 14. And that's going to be kind of the other rank for when she gets a 6-star. So either rank 10 or rank 14. There's nothing really in between, because rank 10 has the highest TP boost and rank 14 has the highest TP retain. So those are the two options. Generally, rank 14, I think, loses a little bit of damage, since she kind of has to run suboptimal timelines at her 6-star form with that. But also she can be used on more timelines that are kind of more conventional, since she can just be a regular tank and work that way. So both have their ups and downsides, but right now 10 rank is the clear choice, and if possible just keep her there. But if you do think, yeah, she needs to move up, then that's not as much of a loss as you may think. Just that for the first XChika loop, I don't think R14 actually works. She does need to be R10, and if she's R10-6, her UE can't be max level at that point. So just something to keep in mind. Generally, she's a very easygoing character, despite having such a powerful UP. So yeah, not much to worry about here, but just to be careful of. Now, moving on, Akari. So Akari is quite a cutie, but sadly there's a little bit too little information about her, because JP only got her 6-star a little while back, and it's now coming kind of to the other servers, so Taiwan one and Korea. So yeah, it's kind of hard to tell how exactly she can be used and whether it's worth keeping her super low builds until then, because Akari 6-star is quite far into the future. So yeah, there's a decision to be made here, because she has an eSports build, which is 11.4, and you can kind of tell here the refines are very specific, basically just going only as far as necessary to get the maximum TP stats and no further. And you can also go a little bit more, 11.5, where you just add the top right, which is her the healer wand, and that one adds a little bit of death stats, but also some damage, which is kind of nice, and also some heal boost, which is sometimes required for her to survive. So that's going to be also the theme for Akari. Sometimes she needs the death stats to survive, because she does take the role of a tank a lot of the time when you don't have Ilya or Anna tanking. And that's kind of the issue here where we need to work around. So on one hand, she doesn't want to be so super tanky, but she does see use as a tank right now. So decision should be made. Are you going to abandon these tank timelines and just treat her as non-existent when you would run her in those? So, or are you just going to say, okay, JP does it at rank 14. I'm just going to say, okay, we're going to rank up as needed and keep her at rank 14 and be happy with that, and just run the known rank 14 timelines when those come, since those are viable. However, we also know sometimes the rank 11 timelines exist and they are quite a bit more powerful. So there is merit to keeping her at rank 11. Another thing here, her UE, it doesn't need to go up right away. However, it's kind of an adjustment tool where if you already have her 11.6, then you can increase the UE level to make her survive a little bit more before actually ranking her up. It's especially useful if you already know, okay, I only need her to tank this time. After that, I'm never going to use her as a tank again. Then you can just say, okay, we're going up with UE, keeping her rank as is, and that's that. Easy solution. So yeah, Akari, kind of just a thing where depends on how much you're going to use her and how much you can afford to just forego using her in tank timelines. I've added some examples here just from CB10, from global server, and then just some from CN server where they used her. Notably CB20, she was part of a more conventional team for C3, and it was, I think, the optimal mage team for C3, which is quite the surprise since they have so many good units. But these ones here are some of the only ones I found from servers that have it at 6-star, and you can kind of get a feel for how she works and how tight her timings appear to be, because most of these are from phase 2 and phase 3, which are kind of the things you already just one punch at this point. So yeah, you kind of get your own a little bit of a feeling for whether you think it's worth keeping her at rank 11 or not. I'm going to try with mine, but I kind of suppose at some point it's just going to be necessary for her to go up. So next up is 6-star UE. So right now we shouldn't really be using UE. We shouldn't really be touching her, but I know a couple people like her a lot and they can't help themselves. So I kind of empathize with that. But the thing is, 6-star UE is someone who wasn't really all that used on release, but she has the potential to be very powerful because she does have a 100% action speed buff on her UB and also does heal quite a lot. So in the fights where she fits the requirements for a healer and you also have a conventional team, so you're not just looping over and over again, she could be quite powerful. So it's one of those things where we can't really tell how powerful she's going to be because there hasn't been really any optimized use of her, but once CN gets their hands on her, I kind of assume we're going to see 1 or 2 pretty cool timelines with her, and if you want to make sure you can run those, then best to just keep her where she's at right now. So yeah, not really much to say because I'm not really an expert on her. Also, if you do want to use her, rank 11.3 is kind of the standard build you should probably use. But if you're already fairly deep into rank 11 and it's all refined and stuff, you can go up to rank 12 later without many issues. So that's not a big deal. Next up, NYui. She's coming to global fairly soon. Not for next CB though, which is CB11 as at the point of this video. So she has the big advantage that she only comes in on high damage timelines. So a lot of the time the attack down on her S1 is actually a positive. So normally you wouldn't want to attack down the opponent because that kind of cuts down on your TP generation from damage. But since the incoming damage is so high in the timelines where she's used, you often actually want it because, for example, if you use her with XChika, the attack down allows XChika to be a couple levels lower because with the attack down she can survive until the loop gets going without having her level higher. So kind of sometimes that's an option to take, where if you want your XChika or another character to be of a lower level for later timelines, then you can up the S1 and use that to keep them down and preserve them for later use. So that's one option, but at the same time, obviously keep in mind having it high could sometimes cause trouble for other timelines because none of her other skills really decrease the incoming damage, they just heal or regenerate it. So that's kind of a thing to keep in mind there. But overall, she's just a very nice character to build, since she can just say 11-2 and be super squishy, but if she would die, she can go up to 12-2, and that's a fair stopping point because she just heals and regenerates so much that most of the time it should be fine to keep her there. But if necessary, she can go up to rank 13 or just 13 with some extra stuff equipped. That's probably fine too, because if you look at some of the examples from later, you'll notice, yeah, she's ranked up a little bit, and that's totally fine for what she's used for, since most of the time her timings aren't too tight. It's a barrier and a regen, so unless you have a point where if she's delayed by one action, the boss just wipes your party, it's mostly gonna be fine. Which, next up with Misato, kind of similar. She's our current healer of choice, and there's not really much to worry about with her either, except for some of the future timelines. So CN doing CB19 used her in an XChika loop as the main healer, and surprise, surprise, the optimal Misato is one that nobody in Global really has anymore after Scorpion CP, because turns out the optimal one is 3-star with level 70 UB and some other min-max bullshit. So those guys over there, they make dummy accounts to fill a whole clan with to chase rank 1, but I suppose in Global 5-star is probably going to be enough, because you can still run the timeline. It's going to be, I think, 500,000 damage loss in a 13 million damage timeline, so who cares? It's not going to be the end of the world. However, just to keep in mind, yeah, the MDEF buff on the UB can be an issue sometimes, as it was on CP19 with Glutton, but every known application of her doesn't actually care about it that much. However, do keep in mind there are benefits to keeping her low, since some timelines, like in CP14 I believe, do benefit from her being a little low in some regards. Like, for example, the E level again can be adjusted to increase her tankiness or decrease it, and also have the heal boost as an extra added bonus here. So kind of a lot of stuff to adjust, but mostly it doesn't matter. So Misato, not really to worry about, but the general guideline of not touching her until needed does apply. So let's move on to one of my personal favorites, 6 stars Maho, and she's got a lot of colors in her little summary over here, which notably EX, I think that's one of the first things a lot of people find out, is that you want to keep Maho's EX low, where on current JP, it generally doesn't matter as much. However, there are always some low level and low EX Mahos around to borrow, because there are applications for that, but the general members just, you can't expect them to have too low of an EX skill. So generally it can be relatively high, just because you can't make timelines that low if you can't be borrowed, just because most people have it higher. However, in Global, all of this was already known, so there's going to be a lot more people with a low EX skill, and potentially also a low level overall and less gear. So that's just something to keep in mind if you do plan to use her for PvP, for example. If you're actively using her still, then you probably are going to lose out in some timelines. Like, for example, if I am going to move over, where is mine? Here she is. So mine is currently in the full eSports build, just no tankiness from R11 and her EX skill at level 1. However, she can't really be used in PvP like this. So this is just, I touched her because I like her and because none of this matters in my opinion. However, even the level could matter. So if you're raising an account where you haven't actually used Maho yet, there is a real argument for just not touching it all and keeping her level low, because as we may soon find out once CN gets their hands on her, she could be quite broken, because Glass Maho could have some insane applications with, as any unit with a TP charge on her UB has. So who knows, maybe they find some crazy loops with her, but mostly I doubt it. Mostly I think she's just going to be used as she was on JP and all the other servers, and I've added some examples of that here, where she's just a very strong TP battery and keeps the team charged, and others who potentially use TP charges, and they all feed off each other, and it's a neat little engine going. So yeah, as for ranks, very simple, 11-3 in what I just showed over here, or rank 12-2, top right 3, bottom right 4. Yeah, pretty simple overall, not much to talk about there. Just keep her at that. She's tanky enough to survive any CB application in that state and can level up if necessary. I don't think gear really needs to increase until we see phase 4 or phase 5. So yeah, overall, nice girl, but if you really don't want to miss out, just don't touch her. And now we get to Shinobu, which is the first of our summoners. So Shinobu isn't just a summoner, she's also a shredder with her UB. Since the UB shred is kind of low compared to someone like Makoto, who is just twice as much, it's not as important. However, it's an AoE shred, so for multi-target she could see use sometimes and potentially is one of these stronger ones. So TP boost is a consideration. And yeah, but the most important thing is her skill 1 with Skull Daddy, and at this point other servers are we're going to get her UE, but we are still quite a bit out because of CR's clone schedule. But the main thing to keep in mind here is her summon, Skull Daddy, scales off of her stars and gear rank. So whenever you rank her up or star her up, Skull Daddy also becomes more tanky, just like if you would level him up. So what this means, for timelines where she's used to TP battery, so where you just feed Skull Daddy into the boss to charge TP, you want to add 3-star, and you want to probably add rank 8-5 to have the least amount of tankiness on Skull Daddy alongside skill level 1. However, I am at this point not aware of a real application where this is just the best timeline to use. So having it is nice. I think it would be cool to find a timeline where that's optimal, but I'm not aware of any where it actually is. So the most common application, due to her UE, which has a hefty P attack and P crit buff on it, is with a S1 that's as high as possible after that. So right now you want it as low as possible, but after UE you want to check ahead how high you can get it before it bricks for another timeline. And that's already happened, which happens to be for 5-star Shinobu, that's level 108 for Minotaur and Peaky-Hen, and for 4-star, which is also kind of one of the reasons why you see a lot of 4-star Shinobu, it's kind of just max. So that's the advantage of 4-star Shinobu. You can keep the S1 at max level and kind of amp the damage of other units a little bit more. So that's kind of the upside of that. But 5-star is still completely workable for the timelines that I know, as long as her S1 is below 108. In fact, 5-star is just required when you use the Skull Daddy as a decoy, because 4-star often dies too early. to actually function. So that's Shinobu. Just keep in mind, if you want to make a 5-star, keep it below 108, or keep it 108 or less, or one level less, just in case I've made a mistake or someone else made a mistake. So yeah, that's kind of her. Look forward to working with her, because I think after this CB, where we already used her, CB10, it's been kind of interesting. But once her UE comes, it's going to be a lot cooler, because she does lead to some very high damage timelines, and the P-crit buff is kind of the first one of those types. Next up, Chika. So I didn't really think we'd ever use Chika in CB much. However, during CB9, due to the weird scheduling where we didn't have Chrissy, meaning the cards actually used a Chika Shinobu timeline on C3, where she was maximum eSports. Like, we had very strict requirements to her level and to her skill 2 level and to Shinobu's S1 level and all of that stuff, which, by the way, SSuzume was just simpler and easier and better. But it kind of illustrates how sometimes this kind of stuff does matter, especially on units that you would normally just expect, okay, I'm not going to use her anyway, I can just max her, which in that case, yep, sorry, she's bricked. But luckily I did find her next application, because someone from CN was nice enough to inform me of that, and that is during CB20, where you can check that out. They used double Chika, so they actually found a way to use Chika alongside XChika in a loop, and that was very optimal. So surprisingly, double Chika, they do stack, as in they stack more damage, and that's kind of funny that it worked out that way, but it's pretty cool. And if you like Chika like I do, then I highly recommend keeping her untouched for now, because some of those timelines seem to have rather tight requirements, where if you stop building her now, which is around the CB10, CB11 time, you're probably fine for those. But if you keep just upping her, it's gonna be doomed. So yeah, her gear optimally 11.4 or 12.2, and I'm just gonna go ahead and show you mine real quick. Let's see over here. So mine's 3-star, and I haven't equipped this yet. That's not really a reason, and this one had to be equipped for the C3 timeline during CB9, and her skills are just these were the requirements. So sadly, my Fairy's Lullaby is already 102, and I think for some of the timelines the maximum was 100. After that, you kind of fall into a less optimal timeline where XChika needs to be lower, which could be a problem if you used her on the previous CB. So just something to keep in mind. Ideally, just don't touch her. That way you have the highest chance of getting to use her in her optimal state the next time she comes and graces us with her presence. So now to the little upstart that turned out to be the new star of Global. So SSuzume, who would have guessed that she would be such an important character and play such a pivotal role? Because during CB9 on C3, turns out the best timeline was just SSuzume feeding her golem into the boss and triggering UB over and over, charging us, and who knew that we kind of had a pseudo loop with her where we kind of abused the boss mechanics in that way. And for that one, the only one that mattered really was that the summon was at level 1 or relatively low, and that she was 3 stars. However, and now immediately on the next CB, she was used again on the optimal timeline, and I've also attached that one, which was C5, where this time, no 3-star, that's not enough. You need 5-star SSuzume. Like, forget just pulling her. You also need to invest those DA. And optimally, you would also have to have her UB and S2 at very specific levels, just so that you can use 4-star Makoto and get the optimal timings. But no worries, if yours were maxed out, I gotcha. You can just use 3-star Makoto. Everyone has that, right? No issues. So yeah, SSuzume is just an example where it pays off to have an absolute maniac who pulled her, kept her untouched, and is willing to 5-star her for 1 CB just for fun. And I can kind of relate to that, I guess. That's just really cool in my opinion, and I'm really glad we got to use her. Or not we, because Kana called my clan, we didn't get to use her. We didn't have any 5-stars. So, but I know a couple other clans did have 5-star SSuzumes, and I think it's cool that they got to use her. So yeah, I'm not sure if she's ever going to see use again. I kind of doubt it, but I'm also kind of saying that in the hopes that I'm jinxing it and we do see her again, because I think it's just very cool. So yeah, for her, the usual applies in terms of gear, but at this point I think, yeah, if you want to keep yours untouched, you already know the deal. Everyone else, I think, already touched her if they were going to, so I don't think there's much to say here. Just a very cool unit that I'm glad we got to use and that saw her time in the spotlight. And now to someone who's going to have a time in the spotlight very far into the future, XChika. She's going to be the centerpiece for all the XChika loops that we will see once Neneka and 6-star Kokkoro are here. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about for XChika, and I plan to make a separate video on her. But for now, I can just show you the optimal XChika. Let me just find mine. So this is what your XChika should look like. Level 1, rank 1, bond level 1, everything untouched. And I mean that because it's very easy to make a mistake with her. And generally, the timelines aren't as tight as some may think. However, it would be a shame if you bricked yours, because she is a character that once the game kind of keeps progressing and we go through, there are going to be less and less that are untouched like this. And it's just going to be very difficult for clans at some point to find new untouched XChikas, which is, for example, one of the reasons I have 3 accounts with 1 XChika on each. So just if you want to be an asset, keep it untouched. But I do think there's genuine reasons to up her. Like, for example, I've attached a CB14 timeline with her that was kind of one of the first pseudo loops with her, where she needs to be 5-star and some rather high levels and a specific gear setup to kind of get a nice little loop with mages going. And it couldn't keep up with the best physical timeline at the time. However, it was a very cool timeline, and it was a way to make mages work on a boss where they really weren't supposed to. So that's kind of one of the deals with XChika, because a 5-star with relatively high gear, that Chika isn't going to be used again probably. So most likely those who are brought up for borrows are just kind of single use. And even the glass Chika, which is the 11.5 XChika, kept at 72, which is the level required to equip off the gear, isn't always going to be usable in every timeline, since 7.1 and 9.1 do have very real applications. So if yours is still untouched when those timelines are used, you can afford to just say, okay, I'm going to bring mine up, borrow another character, potentially, hey, you're missing one, so now you can bring yours up, use her, borrow the other character, and you're good to go. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I really recommend not immediately going to the standard glass XChika build and just saying, yeah, okay, yeah, mine is ready now, because chances are potentially you're going to miss out on a unit, and when you need to borrow XChika and that unit, you just won't be able to run that timeline. So yeah, for her, it's just, if you want to use her, go dive in, check out different videos from other servers. CN got their hands on her right now, and I think in Korea they posted a lot of her timelines, because honestly they're just very cool to some people like me, not as cool to others who have to play her, but still, due to the nature of her timelines, there's a lot more material out there, and I think you'll be able to get a bit of a feel for how she's used and what kind of the repercussions are when you bring her up, in fact. So yeah, one thing I can say, if you're going to use her conventionally in timelines, she does go up to rank 11 for that, and it's not the end of the world. She can still be used for some timelines, but do be aware you're locking yourself out of quite a couple of them right away. So be careful with her, and just don't touch her for now if you want to be just having a blast later on with the XChika loops. So that's going to be it from me for now. I hope this was informative, despite being 3/4 of an hour long, but still, if you have any questions or critique, just let me know, and I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye.